Hey guys, don't talk about how to build a competitive Dark Angels list with the new Wrath of the Rock detachment, and let me tell you, it's a really strong one, so I think you'll be quite happy with it. And without further ado, let's dive right in. As we usually do in this series, we'll first talk about the faction rules and my general thoughts about how we should approach building this kind of roster. Wrath is a very versatile detachment. I was very happy when I first read it because I really like all kinds of Swiss Army knife-like detachments, especially this one, which kind of has all the necessary tools, like all the basic ones that you really want to have, and some specialties. Those typically are the best detachments you can have. Very rarely we'll have a gem like the Gladius, which is just pretty much good at everything, and those tend to be kind of boring as well because you don't really have any specialty. The only specialty you can create is with just the units that you choose, not the detachment itself. Here you actually have a theme to work around, but it's not restrictive and it's not limiting you in what your army can and cannot do, at least not a lot. This one tackles a very important problem that Marines have, and I don't want you to laugh when I say that Marines have a survivability problem. And yeah, of course, if you're playing Drukhari or like any other very fragile army, you probably are giggling and may not agree with me, but honestly, the Space Marines, even though they're not paper thin, they are at the same time worthy of putting real guns into, and when the real guns point at Marines, they die. So anything that can really help with survivability was historically very strong for Marines, and this detachment provides us with a very powerful buff, which is -1 to wound, conditional though, so only for strength that's higher than your toughness, for infantry and mounted units. That works in combat as well. So your infantry and mounted squads suddenly become much harder to actually wound, and the big bonus of the -1 to wound is that it works no matter what strength targets you. I mean, obviously, as long as it's higher than your toughness. So even if something like a las cannon shoots at your Terminator that is only toughness 5, it's still going to wound you on 3s and not 2s, even though it's even more than twice your toughness. Army-wide, this is really powerful, and it can, over the course of the game, make a significant impact onto how much damage your opponent is able to do. And in addition to this, you also have a pretty potent suite of stratagems to help in all other important areas. Namely, you have a way to give infantry and mounted squads +2 strength for their shooting, which is very important as there are a lot of really good shooting infantry squads that do need that extra imp of strength to make them wound stuff like vehicles and monsters, which is pretty much what you want to be able to kill, better. You have also a mobility stratagem, which is kind of like taking Gladius and getting the best out of it into one stratagem, almost, not exactly, but almost, which is advance and charge and shoot for 1 CP, and if you're Raven Wing, you also get to fall back, charge, and shoot. All that for just 1 command point. It's pretty amazing, and I specifically love the fact that the advance and charge part gives you advance and shoot as well. So if it just so happens that you will be advancing and charging something that also is pretty good in shooting, which, let me tell you, there are units like that in the Space Marine book, especially the Dark Angel side, you will get to use your entire unit and not just its fighting capacity. The lack of fallback and charge for all other stuff is kind of annoying, but obviously they needed to add some sort of limitation to that stratagem, otherwise it would be like one of the best mobility strats Space Marines have ever seen, and therefore you will not be able to fall back and charge with something like a Deathwing Knight, and that's annoying. It's not great, and you have to consider that in how you build your roster and especially how you play the army. It is a significant problem, but it's not something that would make me go, okay, this is not a powerful detachment. It is still a very strong one. And another stratagem that we have access to, which is a very unusual one, is a sort of old heroic intervention one, which is, if you did not play in 8th and 9th edition, heroic intervention used to work in a way where your character could, and the characters did not join units back then, they were just solo, the character could actually at the end of your opponent's charge phase, if I remember correctly, and this one works like that, at the end of the opponent's charge phase, could actually charge himself sort of pseudo charge into the unit that is close by, and most could only do 3 inches. Space Wolves, if I remember correctly, could do 6, and that was a very powerful ability because it did not allow your opponent to move block you, for example, or to move block you whilst also being on the objective, and that's pretty strong. And this stratagem is only 1 CP, and yeah, it pretty much allows you to charge for free in your opponent's charge phase. I'm gonna use this one a lot or often, but when you will use it, it's going to be game changing, let me tell you. And your opponent will probably just not do a lot of stuff that they would otherwise do, and sometimes they'll forget and you'll be like, oh, actually I'm charging in your charge phase. That will be very, very funny for you, not for your opponent. In addition to stratagems, you also get a couple of good enhancements. I'll mention 2 of them. First one is turn 1 Deep Strike for your Deathwing units. And this is really good to aggressively position your Deathwing Knights. This is only in your movement phase, so you cannot use it to rapid ingress, but you can use it to pre-position them turn 1. You are probably not going to actually be charging turn 1. So if it's like your first turn, you're probably not using it to actually roll the charge because you have no way to give yourself +1 to the charge roll. Absolutely in 0 ways, if I understand correctly. At least I don't know of a way to give them any bonus, and you don't want to try a 9 in most scenarios. Instead, you want to find the most annoying place for your opponent to put your 5 Deathwing Knights into with the character, or it can be even a squad of Deathwing Terminators, it doesn't really matter, and put them there. And then next turn, remember, you have advance and charge, so your threat range is very, very big, and your opponent will have to deal with that somehow, and it probably will be difficult. The second one is a potent, not potential, weapon enhancement, which gives your Adeptus Astartes character +2 strength, +1 AP, and +1 damage. So it's a really, really strong set of buffs, and the +1 damage part is obviously the most important one, and you have a few good units to use this on, like, for example, the Ravenwing champion in the Ravenwing command squad, as well as all the normal generic characters. You can even give that to like a Spaceman Captain with the traditional combo of Assault and Recesses in Impulsor. Spaceman Captain does the finest hour and fights with the damage 3 power fist, fishing for devastating wounds. This all still works amazingly well here, and it would work very well with this enhancement. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40K coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Next, we'll discuss the shooting and melee damage dealers. So considering that Dark Angels provide us with a good number of melee units to choose from, like the special Dark Angels melee units, and the detachment actually lends itself heavily to combat, we really want to have quite a lot of these units in the roster. Plus, to be honest, the Deathwing Knights are such a staple choice that you will probably be running them in your Dark Angels force anyways. Yeah, an obvious choice and pretty much mandatory, to be honest, because they are some of the most survivable Terminators units in the game. For those who don't really know, they are 4 wounds each, in addition to the normal stat line of a Terminator, which is pretty good by itself. 2+ armor, T5, 4+ vulnerable save, 3 wounds. These guys are 4 wounds, and they're -1 damage as well. So they are already very hard to deal with. There are only a few things that are kind of efficient into them, which is damage 3, because damage 3 goes down to damage 2, and then 2 shots will kill the guy. It's still twice the needed shots compared to a normal Terminator, but also they are like 50 points each, so it offsets some of that efficiency. But as soon as you can add any sort of extra modifier on top of that, they again become very, very difficult to kill, and much less efficient to even try, because they also have the protection, once per game protection from mortal wounds. So if someone wants to just grenade them to death, this will probably not work, at least will not work from the first try. The advance and charge is also super helpful for them, because one thing that Deathwing Knights have a problem with is delivering them, and being able to stage them somewhere and then, when necessary, just expand their threat range by those 3.5-4 inches is going to be very valuable. Next are the Inner Circle Companions, and they're good in Gladius. They're just as good here, to be honest, with only slight drawback of not having a +1 to wound strat. There is no stratagem in this detachment that would really change the wound roll in any way. You have a +1 to hit stratagem for your non-Deathwing, non-Ravenwing units that started the command phase in engagement range with someone. A very weirdly worded strat, but it's actually not really for combat. It's more for giving you the extra OC when you are on an objective. So if you are stuck in combat and you're just shy a few OC from flipping it, that's where you would use this 1 CP strat. So you don't really have a way to buff your melee in terms of the wound roll in any way here from the detachment, which is sad, and it means that whenever you're building the roster, you need to take the units that are kind of good without that +1 to wound, or they can bring it with them. So Inner Circle Companions don't have that problem on the catastrophic level like the Thunderwolf Cavalry, for example, because their swords are strength 6 and they also have lethal hits inbuilt on their strike profile, so they're pretty decent into any toughness anyways, unlike the TCAV, which are only strength 5 and no lethal hits inbuilt. So I think they're fine in this detachment even without any kind of buffs, and you can obviously attach characters to them to solve the problem completely. Advance and Charge again makes them really dangerous and gives you a huge threat range. They can fit a whole squad plus a character into an Impulsor, so you can have this 7-man unit threatening essentially 3 inches disembark, 6-inch move plus d6 advance, and then charge of range around that Impulsor chassis. The Ravenwing Black Knights are another great option you have, and a pretty solid one as well, with 3 attacks in melee at 5-2-1, so strength 5 AP2 damage 1, with devastating wounds as well from one of the recent Ballast data slates, and anti-monster vehicle 4+. On the charge, you can reliably put a dent into most vehicles or monsters, or even destroy them if you have the command squad in the unit, which I highly recommend to have the command squad, because he gives the unit +1 to the charge and advance. You also have an apothecary there who can revive models, so you can actually get some guys back during the course of the game if they are not completely wiped in the first salvo. And these guys have the 5+ invulnerable save, so they're not that easy to kill. Plus the Ancient has 4 wounds in the Ravenwing command squad, so you can put, if you're targeted by damage 3 stuff, you can put that on the Ancient first. You will lose the extra OC in the unit, but you can then revive the Ancient using the apothecary, so it's kind of a useful combination there. Also get a free heroic intervention from the Ancient as well as the +1 to advances and charges, so that unit is really fast. So they move 12 plus the advance +1, so it's going to be an average of 4.5, so that's 16.5 inches, and then your average charge of 8 with the +1, so the average threat range of 24.5 inches. Obviously they are mounted, so they cannot go through walls. You cannot go directly to your target. Sometimes you'll have to go around, but the speed they have is gonna compensate most of that. They are a pretty strong alpha strike threat. If you want to have that in your roster, you can just have a unit of Black Knights with the Ravenwing command squad and just send them up the board to shoot all of their plasma into the target, and then just charge it to do as much damage as possible and let your opponent deal with it. It's not cheap, but it's also not that expensive. With the character, so the command squad and the full 6-man squad of Black Knights, is 300 points on the nose. And a few honorable mentions. So Lion, of course, he's much better now with the damage to sweep. He also has the conditional -1 to wound himself as well. So even though he is a monster, he still kind of benefits from the detachment just because he has the same ability inbuilt. Really likes to have the advance and charge, so I can easily see him in this detachment, and the aura of Rio wants to hit and wound that he has for melee for your units is also very welcome on both the Deathwing Knights, the Inner Circle Companions, and even the Ravenwing Black Knights, though something tells me that those will be too far up the board for them to benefit from his ability. Blade Guard Veterans are a really interesting one because they really love the -1 to wound, and with their 3 wounds and 4+ invulnerable save and -1 to wound at the price point of 80 points per 3 models, they are some of the most efficient infantry units in the Space Marine hierarchy, or maybe even in the game, but they have a problem, which is the strength 5 on their swords. And as I said before, there is no way to give anyone here +1 to wound or lethal hits or anything like that would help you with the wound roll. So you either only exclusively use them for chaff and like lower toughness stuff, which I don't like, or you run a full 6-man squad with something like a chaplain who would solve that problem for you. But then it's not as small of an investment, still pretty cheap, 160 points for 6, and then chaplain's like 65 points, I think. So it's a trade-off, but it's an interesting choice, and I think they're pretty good in this detachment still. Terminators are not bad also, because they're much cheaper than the Deathwing Knights, and you still have a lot of damage output potential from them. You can use the +2 strength stratagem on them too, though of course you don't want to waste that on bolters if you have anything else alive at that point, but maybe everything else is dead, so you might as well use it. But I really don't like the fact that their power fists don't have a way to get over the toughness 9, toughness 10 threshold for most vehicles and monsters, so unless you run them with the Terminator Chaplain, you will probably be disappointed whenever they fight against anything that is higher toughness. So figure out how you want to approach that. Do you want to, again, only dedicate them to mid-toughness stuff, or do you want to actually have an ability for them to fight off bigger threats? In any case, they are cheap enough for you to consider, so not bad. And lastly, the aggressors are an interesting choice here, again, because they're infantry, they benefit from the detachment. They also benefit from the +2 strength stratagem for shooting pretty well, because both their flamers and their bolters are pretty good when they are higher strength. I'm not gonna lie and say that they're become suddenly amazing, but they just become pretty efficient. Again, not as efficient as some other shooting units that we'll take a look at in a second, but not bad. And they also have twin linked on their strength 8 power fists, so they don't really care that much about the +1 to wound. I mean, they would love to have it, but it's not mandatory for them. So take a look at them as well. They're pretty cheap now. And now the shooting damage dealer. So because we have that amazing +2 stratagem for the non-max shooting, we want to have a lot of, well, most of our shooting based in the mounted or infantry choices. And we thankfully have quite a lot of them in the Space Marine force. So here are the best ones in my opinion. First, the Hellblasters. Of course, where can we go in the Dark Angels detachment without some good plasma? And these guys really love the strength 10 plasma access, which is much more efficient against most vehicle monster targets. It still sucks against toughness 11 and 12 though, because it's not +1 to wound, it's not a flat modifier, it just adds strength. So against something like toughness 9, for example, you would essentially get +2 to wound here, whereas with the toughness 11 you get +0 to wound. So that's the problem with getting extra strength, and it means that you'll just have to have another way of dealing with the higher toughnesses. Talking about that, Eradicators are your toughness 11 solution, because they started as strength 9 on their meltas, which means that they will be wounding on 4s the toughness 11 targets, and as soon as Eradicators wound anything on 4s or better, their full reroll to wound against that will do all the rest. They just become crazy efficient at that point and very reliable. On wounding on 5s, not really reliable. They are calculated to be this sort of only works if you have this modifier unit, unfortunately. So you still don't have a good solution for toughness 12 targets, but for all the other stuff, that's just perfect for you. Inceptors are also amazing against toughness 10 and lower units, because they have the twin linked for their plasmas, and they also have unparalleled ability to actually deliver the damage to your opponent because of their 6-inch deep strike. So it's almost impossible to hide from these guys. All the normal mech shooting like gladiators, vindicators, and predators doesn't become obsolete or bad here in any way, shape, or form. They're still really good choices, just they don't have the synergy with the detachment apart from the advance and shoot that actually works for Adeptus Astartes models and not just the infantry or just the, I don't know, Deathwing or Ravenwing. So you can actually advance your Vindicator up the board, which for Vindicators it's almost like a life and death kind of situation because of their lower move characteristic and only 24-inch range. range. So Black Knights are also kind of an honorable mention here because each having 2 shots with their Plasma Talon with the Rapid Fire 1 ability at strength 8, AP 3, damage 2 if you're overcharging is really pretty good, and you can still use the +2 strength stratagem on them so that it can be a strength 10 plasma. So from 6 guys is going to be 18 shots. You can have rerolls to hit on that, of course, from oath, and that makes sense for you to just, if you're shooting and then charging something that is very tough, you might as well just pour everything into that target and make sure that it's dead. Of course, keep in mind that you'll be charging afterwards, so you don't want to increase your charge distance that much, but perhaps this is something like a one big night, so you don't really care about how many wounds you're going to deplete from it. Lastly, the support units. So Invader ATVs are amazing here at 60 points per model. They're really hard to beat for actions and just being a good thing to have with OC and Multi-Melta and the -1 to wound as well, which works on them. So I highly recommend to have a couple of Invader ATVs in your roster whenever you're running this detachment, or pretty much Space Marines in general, to be honest. Dark Shroud, if you like the idea of having Deathwing Knights at -1 to hit and wound from shooting, the Dark Shroud is for you. It's an amazing piece. I think it costs only 115 points or something like that. Yeah, 115 points. And you get some amazing versatility from it. First of all, it's a vehicle that moves 14 inches and it's not that big, so it's easy to hide. You have 10 wounds at toughness 8 and with a 5+ invulnerable save, so it's not free to kill. It's not like very survivable, so don't have it in the open. But if you're smart about how you use it and you park it like behind the ruin, for example, within 6 inches of one of your models in the Deathwing Knights squad, that squad is going to have -1 to hit until that last guy that is in range of Dark Shroud is dead. And believe me, it's not fun to shoot at the Deathwing Knights at all. It's less fun still to shoot at them with -1 to wound, and you can imagine how awful it is to shoot at them with -1 to hit as well. In games of 40k, there are sometimes moments where you just need to walk out into the open and survive a turn, and it's very powerful to have the ability to just have a very strong off-putting modifier on that one unit that is trying to survive. Infiltrators, they are not mandatory, but they're really good to have if you have the points for them, because they're gonna make a lot of matchups much easier for you. I would say probably like 60%. And there are a lot of teleporty armies now, armies that use all sorts of teleporty shenanigans. Like the new Tyranids detachment, for example, is very nasty to be deep strike by horror spexes and being charged from 6 inches. So if you want to have protection from them, infiltrators are great for that. Scouts, we talked a lot about them on the channel. They're still really good. They're not as efficient as they were when they were 55 points per unit, which was crazy. They're 70 points now, so there are a lot of options that are close to them in efficiency, but nothing really does the scouting thing just quite like them. So if you like them, they're also more than a valid choice for your scoring. I really like the Space Marine support unit situation now, because there are very few units that are really just bad to take and you shouldn't take them. Like almost anything you can imagine has its utility. There are personally, I think, things that are just a bit better, or specifically for a particular detachment better, for a particular roster better, but pretty much everything has its place, and that's really good. Well done, GW. Land speeders, which are actually storm speeders, I've made a typo here. My favorite one is Thunderstrike, as +1 to wound is really strong for the army that relies on mid-strength shooting, especially considering that it doesn't rely on +1 to wound modifier already. So you will be able to add the +2 strength, and then on top of that have +1 to wound. So that can be a real game changer. Of course, you're paying like 150 points for the Storm Speeder, so you might not have points for it, especially if you're running like 3 squads of Deathwing Knights. But if you have that model and if you like it, if there is a space for it, real estate in your roster, it's definitely not a bad choice. It's a really good one, and you can also advance and shoot it, so there is some utility in that as well. Lieutenant with a combi weapon, I've talked at length on the channel about how amazing this guy is. I try to include him in every Space Marine roster that I write, just because, again, there's nothing in the Space Marine book that is quite like him, and the level of an issue, a problem that he creates for your opponent just by existing on an objective somewhere is almost incomprehensible unless you played against him. And I played against the combi weapon lieutenant, and believe me, that's never a nice experience, especially if you know what you're doing with the tape measure and you make sure that your opponent cannot really get to him, or if they get to him, it's not convenient for them. Lastly, the jump back assault intercessors. These guys are pretty good. They only suffer in this detachment from the problem of not having +1 to wound, but if you're okay with only fighting them against something that has lower toughness, and you also get the advance and charge, so it's great for attacking those lower toughness kind of skirmishy scoring units of your opponent, they are really good, and they still have all their grenade stuff, their charge mortals, so they will still be quite efficient for their points value. Let alone the -1 to wound that also works on them. And now my favorite part, the roster example. So Wrath of the Rock detachment, and here's something that I would be more than happy to run in a tournament scenario, because I think this is kind of a really good generalized Wrath of the Rock roster. So we have a lieutenant with a combi weapon, already just discussed how amazing he is. A Ravenwing command squad with the ancient weapons enhancement on the Ravenwing champion. So his sword is going to be like strength 7 with AP 3. No, sorry. Yeah, strength 7 with AP 3 and damage 3. 6 attacks. So he is really dangerous, this guy. And he also benefits from the anti-vehicle, anti-monster 4+ that the Black Knights give, so won't have a problem wounding higher toughness stuff, which is amazing. 3 units of 5 Deathwing Knights. These guys also have anti-monster, anti-vehicle 4+ on their maces, so that's another reason why you want to run them in Wrath of the Rock. They don't really care about the +1 to wound. I mean, it would be great to have that, but it's not mandatory. 6 Eradicators with 2 multi-meltas in the squad, and these guys will be riding in a repulsor. I want to say impulsor, I wish. Repulsor with last talon and twin last cannon, so they need that extra ability to move out and get to something that is pretty far because of their relatively low range. So you need the ability to reach out and touch at least a tank that is like on the line with your opponent. You still might not be able to, so that's one weakness of this particular roster, is that you don't have really good long range firepower. You are relying on the Eradicators in the repulsor to get to where you want to, or you need to wait until turn 2 where your 6 Inceptors with plasmas can pop out and shoot something, which, believe me, they will kill the tank. Most likely they will kill the tank that you're firing them at, but it will only be turn 2. So we are skewing into melee here mostly, of course. 2 Invader ATVs with multi-meltas. We have 6 Ravenwing Black Knights who are going to be led by the Ravenwing command squad. So that's my Alpha Strike, sort of like a unit that I send out turn 1 probably, or I stage them turn 1 and then turn 2, send them out to do as much damage as possible and create as many problems as possible for the opponent. Raven Dark Shroud, we've already discussed why it's such an amazing utility piece and support piece, and the aforementioned Repulsor. And that comes to a total of 2,000 points on the nose. Let me know what you think about the Wrath of the Rock detachment. I really like this one. I think it's a very interesting addition to our suite of Space Marine detachments, and I'm happy that they have released it. I think they tried to do like a combination mixed Dark Angels detachment for a while now, and I think this is one of the first, if not the first, actually successful attempt. And also, please let me know if you like the roster that I shared, and if you have any suggestions, maybe you would have done something differently. I would love to know your opinion down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.